Wow, I can't believe this is like my 102nd video. Now, I have to admit, few of them are shorts or clips and stuff like that, but it's so exciting to see what's happening with this channel. In case you have never been here before, my name is Dale, and the name of my channel is Observer of Anomalous Objects, and we are all about the UAP topic. We're all about the paranormal. Sometimes we even talk about things like near-death experiences. So, you know, it has a lot of the paranormal, but our main focus is definitely on UAPs. Now, I want to put a hook out there because I want you guys to be excited about something that we're going to talk about later on in the podcast. It's something I had never heard before. And if you guys know me, you know I'm a pastor, and I had never heard the theory that Jesus's tomb is in Japan. So we're gonna discuss that. That comes out of the Thiaoouba Prophecy book, and so I'm really excited about that. Another thing I'd like to ask is I'm like 29 subscribers away from 1,000, and so I'd really appreciate it. It'd mean a lot to me if you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to hit the bell. That way you'll get all the notifications when the newest podcasts come out. And so I very much appreciate it. Today, we're going to have Samuel Chong on, and he's going to talk about Michel Desmarquet, his book. I mentioned it already, Thiaoouba Prophecy. And it's really an amazing book. It's really incredible. But before I get to that, let me go ahead and start reading a bio of Samuel real quick for you. Samuel Chong is a California lawyer, certified court interpreter, and motivational speaker who focuses on wellness, spirituality, extraterrestrials, and ancient mysteries. He visited Thiaoouba Prophecy author Michel Desmarquet in 2016 and then again in 2018, helping to publish the book's Chinese edition, which became a bestseller in China and in Taiwan. Samuel also translated 334 Lies, the revelation of HM versus Stuhl, and now dedicates his work to spreading the message of these books to inspire hope and positive change. He holds degrees from UC Berkeley, Universidad Carlos III de Madrid, and Northwestern California University School of Law, and lives in Los Angeles, California. Let me go ahead and share the book with you real quick. I'm pretty sure you can find this book at on Amazon or anywhere books like that. You know, that you can find it at probably any bookstore that's out there. And so, without any further ado, I'm going to bring Samuel on the stage right now. Will you please welcome Samuel Chong to the channel? Samuel, it's good to have you with us. I'll be honest with you, it's becoming like a lawyer's gig here. You're like the third lawyer I've had on my podcast now, probably in the last 3 months, something like that. I've had Ivan Hanel, who is Lou Elizondo's lawyer. Mm-hmm. I've had Christopher Johnston, who wrote a book about Roswell, Roswell on trial. And so I'm getting used to having lawyers on. And I guess you're kind of getting used to some things too, because I just saw a podcast you did about 3 weeks ago, or at least that's how long ago it was released, with Paul Begley. And he's a retired pastor. So you've got your pastor thing going. I've got my lawyer thing going. But anyway, I wanted to welcome you to the podcast. I want you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dig into the questions and get going.
I was born in China back in 1978. I came to the U.S. at the age of 15. Went to UC Berkeley, studied economics, got my master's degree from university in Spain. But in my childhood interest, I always wanted to learn about the paranormal, about the mysteries of the world, the answers to all the mysteries of the universe. So I began to do a lot of research. And the reason I got my law degree and become a lawyer is because I really wanted people to take my words more seriously. I guess they become more serious when they listen to a lawyer speak. So that's my one of the reasons that I got my license in California as a lawyer. So that's my purpose.
Well, that's pretty exciting. So did you believe in UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, when you were a kid, or was that something that developed later on in life?
I believe that when I was a kid in China, because the Chinese people believed that there were ET visits in their ancient past. And also in the 1980s, the Chinese government was fairly open in allowing information such as ETs or mysteries of the world to come into the Chinese audience and have them to read about those news stories and articles so that they wouldn't focus too much about the on the internal Chinese politics. So they want to use this as a diversion to make people focus their interest on other matters.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about it is it seems like even though the West, we look at China as being a very closed society, I think you could argue on this because of cultural beliefs that they're more open to the UAP subject than probably the West is from the sounds of things. Would you say that's true or not?
Yes, definitely, because in China, people have an interest in learning about some of the unknowns in the world. They have the
Let's get to the heart of it. Who in the world is Michel Desmarquet, and when did he live? When did he die? How did you come to know Michel?
He was a French Australian who was just like a landscaper, a farmer in Cairns, Australia, Cairns, Queensland, Australia. He didn't have a lot of education. He did not know how to type on computer. So he really relied on a lot of people to help him out when he was writing the book to type it out. And also when he was communicating with me through emails, he relied on his Vietnamese niece to type the emails out. He was dictating to the Vietnamese lady, and then she sent the emails to me. So I wanted to track him down because I really wanted to know what else he knew but couldn't write in the book, Thiaoouba Prophecy. I spent $2,000 on my own. It was a lot of money for me at that time, and I flew from Los Angeles to Vietnam to Phu Quoc Island, Vietnam, and then without knowing his exact address. What I did was that I took a picture of the bungalow that was posted on the internet, showing that where he was living at that time. And then I printed a picture out. I showed it to the local taxi driver after I landed, and I asked the taxi driver to take me there. And as a second try, he took me to the right location. There I met Michel, and I really did not know what to expect. He was not really happy to see me, actually.
So you had to get him to warm up to you a little bit then, huh?
Right. It took a long
Now,
time.
Michel is, my understanding is he was French, but born in Australia. Is that correct?
Yes, he was born in France. Actually, he lived in Australia. He
Okay,
was
that's what.
not born. He had a very thick French accent when he spoke.
And so when you went to see him, was that in Vietnam or in Australia?
In Vietnam, in Phu Quoc Island, Vietnam.
So he had moved to Vietnam after living in Australia for a while. Is that the story?
That's right. He had a divorce and he had to change to a different environment. As a
Oh yeah.
suggestion of his friend, he went to and moved to Vietnam and married again.
Yeah, he's not the first divorced person to move to like Vietnam or the Philippines or whatever, because I mean, most Americans know this. It's hard to live on a single budget, with one income and stuff. So there are a lot of expats over in Vietnam and other places like that. So when did he write Thiaouba's Prophecy?
He had an encounter in 1987 and started writing the book and finished in 1989. But it took him a few years to get it published. He published in 1993. So he was trying to get the book published as a nonfiction in Australia, but he couldn't find a publisher who was willing to do it. So that's why he self-published it at the end.
Okay. Was there another title at one point? Because I read something that there was possibly a different title and he's changed the title. Or do you know anything about that?
Yes, originally it was titled Abduction to the Ninth Planet.
Okay.
And then he really wanted to name the book later on to be The Golden Planet.
Okay. What convinced you that the story was true? And then I want you to answer the next question with that is you've taken it to a whole nother level. I mean, you are out there promoting this book because you really believe in the message of the book and you think that it can help humanity. And so what was it that convinced you that not only that it was true, but that it was so important that you've spent $2,000 just to go meet the guy, not knowing if he'd even talk to you. So what was it that convinced you to do what you're doing today?
It's a chapter, Who Was Christ? Halfway through the book, I thought it could be like science fiction or his hallucination or imagination. But when I read the chapter on Who Was Christ, it really shocked me to a great deal. I couldn't put the book down because I did a lot of research while I was reading it. And then I found out that it really matches a lot of the things that people have been wondering about. I mean, the answers. For example, I did not believe anything in the Bible when I was reading the Bible for the first time after I came to the US. I really couldn't believe that Jesus could perform all the miracles as described in the Bible, or Moses leading the Hebrews out of Egypt during Exodus. I didn't believe anything like that, the magics performed by the magicians of the pharaohs. But then I needed proof, specific verifiable facts. I had a lot of questions when I was reading the Bible. For example, if someone like Jesus could perform miracles after he began preaching, why couldn't he just perform the miracles before he began preaching? And why there are some people who said that Jesus went to India? And why there are so many things that just didn't make a lot of sense? For example, the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, in the name of God or Christianity, that killing so many people. So I was questioning a lot about those kind of things. And then this book answers all the questions, including the question I had in mind: why Jewish people, the Hebrews, were the chosen ones, not the Chinese, not the Caucasians, not the Africans, but why the Hebrews, why the Jewish people, and why Jewish people are so unique and exceptional. Like, they only account for about 2.2% of the world population, but they account for 22% all the Nobel Prize winners. They excel in almost all the different fields that they enter into, in the financial industry, in the scientific communities. They just do a lot of great contributions to humanity. I mean, this is something that really puzzled me. Why are they so unique? But this book explains everything, including why Jesus never performed miracles. At least there's no record of him performing miracles before the age of 30. And why there's some people say that he went to India, and why there's a tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan. If you look it online, you can search for it and you can find descriptions of the tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan, that match the description in the book, Thiaoouba Prophecy.
We're going to get to that. That'll become a question. That's the hook I put out there later and stuff, because that part kind of blew me away. Yeah, those are very, very difficult questions. The first one that you had, that, and this is just my opinion on it, and it's whatever it's worth, because miracles really throw a lot of people. It's like, how can miracles happen? And there are a lot of atheists and others that will look at it that way, and they'll question it. Now, I don't have issues with miracles myself. It depends on what you believe. If you believe that the universe was created, out of nothing, and it just happened, and there's no body behind it, that's one thing. But if you look at creation and you look at the world and you think it was created, then you have to start asking the question, who created it? And I'm not saying that has to be God or something, but if you have that view, you're going to have the idea that somebody created it. And so, for me anyway, and I'm not trying to push this on anybody else, this is just my opinion and my interpretation. But if there's a God that created a universe as big and vast and mighty as it is, those miracles would be super easy. Those would be nothing to do. But like I said, I'm not here to debate theology. That's not what I do. I'm about UAPs and UFOs. But I think it's important that people like you come on and these other theories, because what we're after at the end of the day, Samuel, is truth. And the way you discover truth is by learning new things. There may be more to the story than and stuff. And so, I think it's important that every person out there finds their own truth, that they go into a self-discovery and they do the research themselves to get there. But it's really interesting, because that kind of was, I guess, one of the things that really got you interested in this book, not just the aliens, but the Jesus and the Bible type stuff, which, to be honest with you, even though it's my other job, it's not a lot that I talk about on my podcast. So we will talk more about that than we normally do. Can you give us like a brief summary of the book, though, just kind of to help everybody understand what it's about, kind of the main points, and just doesn't have to be long. You can be brief, but just give kind of a brief summary of it.
So the book talks about the author's personal experience of being taken by the ETs to their planet for 9 days and then came back. The ETs that he encountered are highly advanced, benevolent, compassionate, and loving people. And they told him about a lot of things that we have been wondering about. For example, where we all came from. We all came from different planets originally. And the meaning of life, which is to experience and to learn the spiritual lessons and to follow the teachings of Christ. And also, or other spiritual masters. And also other things, for example, did ancient civilizations exist? Or like, how come we should be spiritual but not necessarily religious? And what are the real dangers on earth facing us right now? Number one, money. Number two, politicians. Number three, journalists and drugs. Number four, religions. And how we should care about our environment. And what about some of the technologies that the ETs have been encouraging us to do additional research? For example, hydrogen engine. Remember, the book was written in the late 1980s, and also the time machine that the U.S. scientists were trying to develop, and a lot of different things, and it contains very specific, verifiable facts and details that I was able to verify at a later date.
Okay, well, let's start with this question. Was Michel an abductee or contactee? Because some people prefer one or the other. Some people are just angry as anything because they were taken and they're rightfully upset. And then other people feel like they volunteered. I know Steve Neal of Breaking the Silence channel, he really believes that in a previous life, he gave him permission to do it. Now, obviously not everybody looks at it that way. So I was wondering, from Michel's perspective, did he feel like he was abducted, or did he feel like he was contacted and kind of volunteered to go?
He was contacted, and then he didn't really have any choice, but he was very happy to be able to go with them. And after he landed on the planet Thiaoouba, he did not want to come back. And after he came back, he wanted to go back to the planet Thiaoouba because it's just seems to him like a paradise, a heavenly place that's very pleasant, that he young and learned, like wished to go back there. And actually, the second I met him, he was waiting for them to take him back.
Oh, wow. I can see why after what I read on it. So let's just describe these Thiaoubans. What did they look like? How tall were they? Where were they from?
They are very beautiful people. They're 9 or 10 foot tall, Nordic looking, blonde hair. They have very beautiful body features, like sexy looking breasts, and also very proportionally shaped bodies. And they are forever young looking because they can generate and regenerate body cells and tissues. So they are always looking like in their 30s. They never die. They never age. They can communicate through telepathy. They can perform all the miracles as performed by Christ, as documented in the Bible, meaning that they can levitate, they can materialize or manifest objects, they can heal all the diseases we can think of. They can actually make an adult human being in 24 hours. So they're omnipotent beings that have been guiding us throughout history. They're just wonderful people.
I have a question, because you mentioned, you brought up Jesus. How did they learn about Jesus? Was there a visitation by Jesus in a former time to their planet, or did they learn about him from our planet? So how did they know to tell us to talk about Jesus? And we'll get into more of that later on, but I'm just, that specific question, how were they introduced to Jesus?
They were responsible for the birth of Jesus and the preachings of Christ and the crucifixion, as well as the resurrection of Christ. So they wanted to preach people on earth about love and spirituality. And they had to make the major event noticed by the people at that time. So what they did was that they put an embryo into the uterus of Virgin Mary. So the young Jesus was born. It caught people's attention.
So was Michael a Thiaouban?
Michel was not he was
No. Michael or Gabriel. I'm sorry, Gabriel. Was Gabriel the angel who visited Mary? Was he a Thiaouban or what?
Either he was a Thiaouban or he was an image projected by the Thiaoubans. Because as you read the book, you can see the ability that they have. They can project images and appear to be like angels in people's mind or dreams.
Okay, so this is where it's going to get a little tricky because some people, and I could kind of sense it when Paul was interviewing you, he was wanting the conversation for the aliens to go to angels, and he asked you a specific question, which is whether these beings were angels or extraterrestrials. And my understanding is they're extraterrestrials. I mean, I think by definition, if they come from another planet, and so where is their planet at, and how long did was he away?
Well, the planet was actually is located in our Milky Way galaxy, and he was away for about 10 days or so. So it took him about a day or like less than a day to travel to their planet.
Right, it's called extraterrestrial. So if he was on a planet and they were from another planet, wouldn't that be terrestrial? The reason I bring that up is, and obviously I'm a pastor, so I'm not knocking Christians, but it's so easy for people. I don't care if you're in the scientific community or if you're in the Christian community. It's so easy to lock yourself in a box where you can only see things from a certain framework. And so for those that are locked into science that don't necessarily want to believe that there are UAPs or don't want to believe that they can get here. And so, we know the swamp gas theory. The new swamp gas, a lot of people are arguing, is drones, so if you don't want to say it's a UFO, if you don't want to say it's a UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon, you just call it a drone now. And that's the go-to word. And this is, I think, for some Christians, I catch the same thing, is they can't get out of that framework of angels and demons. And some of them, they're going to look at, no matter what it is, what they see, whether it's a Nordic, whether it's a gray or whatever, and they're automatically going to say demon because that's like their default word. The other side of it is, then there are some that automatically, they want it to fit within the framework, the paradigm by which their mind and their faith works, and they want it to be an angel. And so those become the default words for people because they can't think outside the box and realize that, being a Christian, someone who believes in God, why couldn't God create other people on other planets, other beings and stuff? It's a big universe. I tend personally think we got some cousins out there. I don't know if all of our cousins are nice. I hear some stories that aren't so nice. I don't know if it's nice to be abducted. I don't know if it's nice to be experimented on. I guess I'd say it's not. But then again, some will argue that we do the same thing to mice. We do the same thing to monkey. In fact, I just was watching the news yesterday, and a bunch of monkeys, a truck had crashed and a bunch of monkeys got loose, and were testing all kinds of different things, COVID and hepatitis C and all these things. And so, I just go, I don't think it's right for either, but it seems funny when we get upset because they're probing on us and testing us, and yet we do things to a lesser species. And so maybe we need to find a better way to test than take, innocent animals like that and test on them. So I don't know how we can take the high road on that one when we do that stuff ourselves. But that's one of the challenges, I think, in trying to interpret these experiences, the ones like Michel's you're talking about, is you've got to let the person who experienced it describe it for you. And then you can decide whether you believe it or not. But I don't have a right to define Michel's what he saw. I don't have a right to say, well, it's an angel or it's a demon. I don't have a right to say it's a Nordic or what, or a gray or whatever. Let the person who saw it, who talked to him, let them define it. You agree with that, Samuel?
I agree, yes. And I do believe that there's a creator which is a pure spirit that doesn't have a face. And it created everything, including the stars, the planets, animals, plants, and also human beings, as well as ETs on different planets. And the creator, when it created everything, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each of our astral bodies. So we are part of the creator, God. And
Is
God,
that the image of God?
Us.
Is that the image of God you're talking about?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. Now, the question that I had is, what in the world were their crafts like? How were they able to cover these vast distances? Which is one of the things that modern science argues against. Why is it's not that they don't necessarily exist, but they can't get here. And so, how are they able to get here? And what do their crafts look like?
So their craft looks like a kind of spherical shaped spacecraft. It's not triangular. It's not like a saucer. It's just like a ball, spherical. 100 meters in its diameter, and this kind of like a gray shining color. And it doesn't have any entrance doors. So Michel, when he entered it, he just walked or teleported through the walls into the inside of the spacecraft. And then they disinfected him using yellow light and blue light, which I found very interesting, among other technologies. And they are very, very advanced in their technologies. So they're able to travel at a speed faster than speed of light, a few times faster than speed of light. What they did was that they traveled at that speed into somewhere in deep space. And then at that location in deep space, they teleported themselves into a different location in deep space. And then from that location, they again traveled at a few times faster than speed of light to their destination. They had to teleport themselves in deep space because according to them, if they did it elsewhere, the spacecraft would have been exploded. So this is their explanation given to Michel. And remember, Michel was just a landscaper, a farmer who did not have a lot of knowledge about physics. So he did not really ask them to elaborate on their technologies. But they did tell him that they had the ability to use anti-gravitational technologies, and they also used antimatter guns to destroy space dusts and also smaller asteroids when they were traveling at such a high speed in space.
Yeah, I always think about space travel. Like I'm a big Star Wars fan, and they always have to navigate around the asteroids and the meteors and stuff. And I just like, how in the world could you manage that? I mean, that's definitely sci-fi there. But if you teleported, or if you had wormholes, you could just bypass the dangerous stuff, and that's how you could get there. Now, one of the things I heard on that other podcast that you said is that the Thiaoubans, their crafts don't crash. That whatever we are collecting is from, and I don't want to use the word inferior, but a less technically advanced species of aliens, and their stuff crashes, but the Thiaoubans don't. Does that also mean that they don't have any kind of, because one of the issues that has come up recently is what's known as biological effects. Do the Thiaouban craft not have biological effects? Say if somebody gets too close to them, will something bad happen to them, or will they be safe?
They will be safe because they have all the ways to make themselves safe. And actually, their spacecraft was controlled not by the minds of the Thiaoubans, but by voice. And also, they have computer screens as well. So, in a sense, they don't really rely on the mental directions of the operators of the spacecraft. They can receive. The spacecraft can receive directions by listening to their voice and their instructions. But in the book, it doesn't really say anything about controlling the spacecraft using their minds.
So is it more like telepathy than an actual audible voice that they use to command, that they think it and it happens, or is it an audible voice command
Is a voice that they speak. So they
that they
speak a
speak?
different language, and
Okay,
they speak into the computer, into their operation system, and the system operates based on their uh, vocal or voice instructions.
okay. Because I knew they did telepathy with Michel,
Yeah.
and kind of surprised I could read his thoughts even, and that kind of freaked him out a little bit. Well, back to that biological effects question. I don't know if you really want to address this. Maybe this isn't in your field, since we're talking about crafts that don't crash and they don't have any negative effects. But let's just bring it up anyway. One of the things that I have noticed is there are some people who have biological effects, normally people who are witnessing craft, but very seldom do I hear of people who were either contacted or abducted who have biological effects. Now, maybe they get some kind of probing or treatment, put on an exam table. I'm not talking about that when I say biological effects. I'm talking about damage from being too close to the craft. Is it the difference between the invited and the uninvited? That you get, if you're invited, they have you protected somehow, and if you're not invited and you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, do you think that's the difference, or what's your understanding of why there seems to be a discrepancy there?
I think that could be the reason, but also there's a distinction between the real ETs and versus the man-made
Oh,
spacecrafts.
the craft. I
And I
wondered.
think some of the, if you listen to Dr. Stephen Greer, he is going to say that the ones that cause biological damages are the ones that are man-made from some of the secret like space programs or some kind of like military fundings in special access programs. So I think the ETs who come to visit us, the real ones, will take precautions not to harm us. So this is actually a universal law saying that you should not harm the ones that you visit. So this is actually very, very interesting because I think if you really study about it, if you really think about it, if the ETs really wanted to harm us, they could have done that long time ago. I don't think they're able to do that, but they're not going to do that.
Right. Yeah. And then not everybody believes that, but that is my hypothesis as well. But I want to respect those that have had negative experiences, and um, I can't guarantee what caused their negative experiences. But the ones that I've had, the ones that other people I know that I'm close to have had, have been more on the, at the very minimum, neutral, on the upside, maybe a little benign. And, but there are still others, Colaris in Brazil, where whatever the NHI was, it was clearly shooting beams at the people, and some of the people died. So I don't want to ignore that. I don't want to make it look like everything's happy and there's no bad. We got to acknowledge that there's something going on, and maybe that's maybe there is an alien race out there that isn't so nice, or maybe it's a spiritual element that people are misinterpreting as well. So I don't have the answers to those questions, but I did like your answer to the biological effects, because I'd wondered that myself. That is this us trying to be them, or these are reproduction vehicles that we're trying to power them, because we haven't unlocked their power sources yet. Maybe we have by now, but when some of the radiation and stuff in the 80s and 90s, maybe that was our first attempt to try to make it like a nuclear craft, because we didn't have their technology. So that fits for me. The part that was really, really troubling for me in the book, and that was the first planet that Michel went to.
Yeah.
And that was disheartening to see, at least the way that Michel was given it, to see what happens to a world that has nuclear war. I mean, it was absolutely heartbreaking. Do you think that they took him to that planet first, so that would be ingrained in his mind, because he had a message that he was supposed to take back? Was that like a visual for him?
That's extremely visual for him, but that was not originally planned. I don't know why they took the detour to show him the aftermath of a nuclear disaster or nuclear war. I think it serves as a warning to the people on Earth. If we don't focus on our spirituality, spiritual development, we're going to be heading towards like that planet. So this is why the book is so important. It's just for people to realize that we need to develop our spirituality alongside with our technology. And if we just focus too much on materialism, if we don't follow the teaching of Christ, then we are going to be heading a disaster sooner or later.
Okay, we're going to get to those questions in a minute. One of the things that seemed a little inconsistent to me, and I'm not trying to be negative here, I'm asking a question, so I'm posing it in that manner, is when the mutated ants, these humongous mutated giant ants, were coming after some of the people who had been mutated as well, they're scarred up, disfigured faces. The Thiaoubans intervened,
Yes,
and they killed all of the ants. And so the question is, why would they intervene in such a small way and not in the micro way, not the macro way, and stop the nuclear war itself? Why would they not do that? What are your thoughts? And I guess what it comes down to is I'm trying to figure out is, are we all on our own when it comes to saving this planet? Are they just going, the other aliens, are they just going to let us destroy ourselves?
well, they help us from time to time, directly or indirectly. For example, when people are so bad, setting a very bad example to their neighbors, they would destroy the people. For example, they did that in the two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. The people over there were just too malicious to the compassionate people. They would save us from time to time. For example, during World War II, they prevented Germany from being the first country to develop the atomic bomb. If you do research, you're going to find out that there was a German scientist called Dr. Heisenberg. He was far more advanced than the American counterparts in researching and developing the atomic bomb. But for some reason, he made a stupid mistake, a miscalculation, and the report was read by Hitler, causing Hitler to believe that Germany didn't have the natural resources or enough raw materials to develop the bomb. So he gave out a plan, causing the Americans to deploy the bomb in Japan, ending World War II much earlier than it would have been otherwise. So they did intervene from time to time, and they are going to intervene from time to time. But if you are a parent trying to teach your son a mathematical problem, how to solve it, you wouldn't just give the answer directly to him. You would show him the ways to solve it and let him to solve it on his own. This is a way to learn. This is a better way to learn. Similarly, if you're a biologist, if you're someone in Mexico seeing a butterfly trying to come out of the chrysalis or cocoon, you wouldn't want to split the cocoon up and let the butterfly fly out. Because if you did that, then there's not going to be enough fluid to go into the wings of the butterfly. If you did that, the butterfly can come out but wouldn't be able to fly. Because this is something that's verified biologists, that the butterfly has to go through the struggling process on its own in order to fly itself. So this is similar analogy to the people on Earth. We have to go through the struggling process on our own and to learn the spiritual lessons on our own in order to survive for the long term on Earth. So this is what ETs have been teaching us. They can help us from time to time, but they never serve the meal on plate.
Okay, so the big question I have is, why do they care about us? Why do they care about us? I don't, is it us or is it the planet?
It's us. Is people. People are more important than the planet, and they do that because in the universe there are different kinds of ETs. Some are very advanced, such as the Thiaoubans. Some are not so advanced, such as the Greys or people on Earth. We are just like elementary school students, and the Thiaoubans are assigned, or their role is to guide us, directly or indirectly, to lead us into the right path, which is spirituality or spiritual development. So they sometimes just to show up as our mentors or angels or gods to some people's eyes to help us to learn about what's really important in life. And in the past, they used a lot of parables, just like trying to explain the dangers of the atomic bomb to a caveman. They have to use illustrations, descriptions, parables, analogies. Similarly, in the past, a lot of the ancient scriptures were written this way. They used stories. For example, if you want to explain the concept of free will, you might want to use a story by saying that, oh, there's a garden and there's an apple, you should not eat the apple. But if you exercise your free will to eat that apple, then there are going to be negative consequences you're going to face. So I think this is a parable for the concept of free will. And I think people need to realize that in the ancient scriptures, parables are frequently used.
Oh, yeah. And as a pastor, I can tell you, I can write down paragraphs of really, really good information, theology, but you know what people remember? Mm-hmm. It's the stories. It's the parables. It's the analogies. That's what they remember. That makes a lot of sense. Now, one thing that they did do, and you mentioned it, they used that thing to be able to decontaminate him. They're obviously not immune to our germs. Is that why, for the most part, people say, I mean, Bigelow said that they walk among us and stuff like that. But is our planet itself a danger to them simply because of the bacterias and germs that we have? And I was wondering, based on the book, where he had to be decontaminated just so that he could be with them. And I think at one point, didn't he have to wear a mask as well?
Yeah, he had to wear the mask not to protect him or the Thiaoubans, but to really filter the strong lights and colors of the planet. And indeed, this is one thing that you need to pay attention, is that to distinguish the real ETs and the ETs that we imitate to be like the ETs, or the human ETs, is something just to look at to see if they decontaminate or disinfect the abductees. Because the real ETs have different biological makeup, and they are not immune to the bacteria or viruses on Earth. So they definitely have to protect themselves or their planet. When they take Michel to their planet, they have to make sure that he doesn't bring the bacteria from Earth into their planet. So, but you're also going to read other abductee stories in which there was no disinfection process. And for those ones, you should think twice to see if those are the real ETs or human beings trying to pretend to be the ETs.
Okay, now one thing that was brought out in the book, and it made a lot of sense, and that is the idea that our spirituality needs to be in front of our technology, that we need to have we're not, with a lot of the technology we have now, we're not ready for it, simply because we are not spiritually mature enough to handle it. And that's the scary part. Everything that is developed can be used for good, or it can be used for evil. It can be used to help, or it can be used to hurt. And so that part made sense to me. So what does that look like? When you talk about developing our spirituality, what does that look like? How do we measure progress? Let me add that too. How do we measure progress?
I think it's really up to the people to realize that we should be spiritual and follow the teachings of the spiritual masters, such as Christ. But frequently, I think the danger is that a lot of the teachings are distorted by organized religions. And by saying that, it's not just limited to Christianity, but also Buddhism. So within 500 years of the death of the Buddha, there was no sculptures or kind of like a picture of the Buddha, because the Buddha did not want people to worship him. Right. The Buddha wanted people to look inside for answers. But instead, if you look at China or Taiwan or other countries in Asia right now, they have the sculptures of the Buddha. They pray, they bow down, and they kneel in front of the Buddha. They worship idols. They worship the Buddha. So this is like one of the messages that the book is trying to convey, is that we should realize that we are connected to the source, the creator, directly. without going through an intermediary agency or like the church or any organized religion. We can just be spiritual and look inside for answers. But a lot of people just want to worship idols. This is why in the Old Testament, it frequently says, "Do not worship idols," because the Hebrews knew this, but the other people didn't know about this. The other people worshipped idols, and the Jewish people, the Hebrews, kind of sometimes forget about that. So this is why we should know that we are actually the creations of the Creator, and we should be spiritual by following the real teachings of Christ. And what Christ taught is about spirituality, about love your neighbors, about seeking for spiritual knowledge. And also, actually, I wrote an article about that. I can send it to you later because this is what I found out, that the essence, the real teachings of Christ.
Okay. Well, my question then is, if I was a Muslim or a Buddhist or a New Age person, you talked about the spiritual leaders. And so are we talking about like Muhammad? Are we talking about Confucius? Are we talking about Buddha? Was there a lesson sent to different cultures through these spiritual leaders? And is that what their spirituality is? Because you tie it specifically to Christ, but if I'm, I guess the Muslims, they have they believe Jesus was a prophet, so maybe they would be able to accept that. I don't know about the Buddhist, whether they have a version of Jesus there too or not. So they're going to have that question, and it's not my question, obviously, but is this specific to Christ, or is this kind of there's a whole bunch of teachers that basically taught the same message, just different ways?
Yes, and also it really depended on the acceptability of the people at that time and their local environment, as well as their cultures. For example, in the ancient past, if you try to explain some of the spiritual knowledge that we know nowadays, it wouldn't have been accepted by them. For example, if you really want to teach people about meditation, you can do that in the past, but you can really explain to them that you should quiet your mind down and empty your mind and then be still. Then you can meditate. But to other people, you can also use prayers as a form of meditation. And actually, if you read the Catholic stories, some of the Catholic priests levitated after deep prayers. So once you get into the state of mind, a meditative state of mind, you can do a lot of miraculous things that people would consider to be magic. So in other words, like you sometimes different cultures have different acceptabilities and different time frames too. So in different times, I think spiritual masters taught different lessons that were accepted by the people at that time.
That's pretty interesting. Seems like everything he experienced in his interaction with Thiaoubans was very, very positive, very loving. Everybody was working together. It was a society that I think most of us would dream about, right? And is that the reason he wanted to go back? Is because he had this contrast between how they lived versus how we lived. Was that the reason why, or was there something else to it?
It's just a feeling of compassion and love of the Thiaoubans, and also how perfect the planet Thiaouba is to him. And the people on the planet Thiaouba, they did not eat they only ate for like every 2 days or so. So they ate very little, but the food is really nutritious because the calories are released at different time intervals. So Michel didn't feel hunger or thirst for a long time. And they had great technologies that are simple but effective. For example, they didn't have such complicated building structures. They have dokos, or the half-X shaped structures, in which you cannot see inside when you're outside. But once you enter from inside into the inside, you're able to see the outside. It's like one-way mirror. mirror, and they have all the different abilities and travel methods. And the animals are really amazing too. And some of the animals spoke like a human sounding language, and the Theubans could communicate with the animals on the planet. They have dolphins, they have horsewomen, uh, like uh, uh, like I can jump like 3 meters tall or so, and they have very interesting birds, and the colors are very vibrant. So he really did not want to come back here because here we have wars. There they don't have wars at all, and here people just are so into money and materialism, and there people are just so nice, and they meditated quite a bit. So there's a sharp contrast between the two planets.
Right. Did I hear you right? Did you mention Nordics? Were they mentioned in the book at all?
Yes, there are Nordic-looking people. They are hermaphrodites too.
Okay. And so what was it that was said about them? I'm kind of interested in Nordics. So where they say where their planet is, what the connection between them and the Theubans are?
The Theubans are different kind of ET from the ones that we call the Nordic ETs. They are like much more advanced than the Nordic ETs that we always talk about. They just are just highly intelligent, and they can do everything that we can imagine. And the Nordics here that we talk about, I don't think they have provided a lot of specific verifiable information. And definitely they're not the Nordic people on Earth, because the Nordic people on Earth are the Caucasians that came from a different planet. And actually, they originally lived in Atlantis, and then they migrate to Northern Europe.
Save that one for a minute, because we're going to definitely get to that. Okay, so we've talked about some of the positive aliens. Did they mention any negative entities that are ET or spiritual entities of any kind?
Michel did not write in the book, but they told Michel about the Greys. They say that the Greys also lived on a Category 1 planet, the same category as Earth. And they did put implants on 150 people or so by the year 1993. But there's no danger to the implants because the Theubans have been watching their activities or actions. They put the implants just to observe us, to see how we respond to our immune system, because we have been losing our immune system since 1948. And the Greys is also a dying species because they also have been losing their immune system for a long time. So this is why they have been trying to see how we respond to the same situation.
Wow. I think it's probably time to move into the very controversial subject. I'm sure that you've gotten pushback along the way on this because, like I said, people tend to operate in their little box, and and I'm not endorsing it, and I'm not being against it either, but it's something that it did intrigue me when I heard it, because I'd never heard it before. I mean, I had 10 years of basic biblical education. Got a master's degree and everything. And I'd never one time heard this until you mentioned it in that podcast. And I was like, wow. So I started doing a little research on it. And why don't you tell us about Jesus' grave in Japan, his tomb in Japan?
Yeah. So in the book, when I read that part, it says people on Earth always want to seek for proof. When you want to seek for proof, go and search the tomb of Jesus in Japan. So I did, and there it is, the tomb of Jesus in Japan. So this really shocked me. So how could Michel, the author, know about this? Because he never traveled to Japan. He was a landscaper in a very remote area in Cairns, Australia. And then that's before the age of the internet. He couldn't have just looked it up on the internet. And I didn't just think that he would just know about this because even nowadays with the internet, very few people know about this. So that's the part that shocked me, and it actually answered a lot of questions I had when I was reading the Bible. For example, if you remember when Jesus, after he began preaching, he saw his mother, and he did not call his mother mother, he called his mother woman. And I was giving a lot of explanations by pastors or from the church on why that's the case. And some of them, the explanations sound plausible, but I think probably just this is something that I speculated that Jesus was actually Christ, a different figure, a different entity. And the Jesus that was born out of Virgin Mary indeed traveled to India through China and died in Japan. The tomb of Jesus in Japan buried the Jesus who could not perform miracles. But Christ was a different entity, a different figure that taught about spirituality and love. Is Christ who was crucified and then resurrected on the cross, resurrected after 3 days. And then I think people need to understand that the ETs wanted the people at that time to learn about the teachings of Christ. And people in the past, as well as people nowadays, were highly skeptical. Unless someone who could perform miracles, the teachings would not have been believed by the people in the past. So this is why they had to send someone who could perform miracles in order for his teachings to be written and believed by the people later.
Yeah, that's actually what the Bible says too. The idea that miracles were given so that people would believe, that they'd have a reason to believe. Now, I do find a lot of it fascinating. There's a lot of debate, a lot of speculation, because we don't really know what happened to Jesus from age 12 up till age 30. And so there are stories out there of Jesus doing miracles as a kid, but the truth of the matter is there's nothing in the Bible that says it. We know that he went into Egypt, according to the Bible, the India and other places like that. If you're using the Bible as your reference, it doesn't say anything about that. It wouldn't say anything about Japan either. So those are coming from outside sources. But if I understand the story right, Jesus went to Japan at age 21, and then he came back. The story says 33. That doesn't fit because even you said age 30, but the story says that he came back to Israel in 33 and began his ministry and stuff. What's your understanding on that part? 'Cause that's I have a document even here that says that, if you want me to bring it up.
That's what people want to like. That's what the people really wanted to connect the fact that Christ began preaching at the age of 30. And actually, they wanted to connect the dots, but that's not what really happened. What happened was that the Jesus, who was born out of Virgin Mary, he traveled to India and arrived in Japan at the age of, I think, 40s or 50s or so. And then he married in Japan, had 3 daughters. And then he never traveled back to Israel or the Middle East to preach. The other Jesus or Christ that preached is a different entity. So the ETs, according to this book, they actually kind of made a body or someone who appeared or resembled the Jesus who went to Japan. And then they had one of their own to enter into the body made by them, so that Christ could remember all the knowledge to perform miracles. So they had to do that because once the astral body goes into the embryo, this is a natural law or natural phenomenon, is that the astral body will have to go through what the ancient Nagas call the river of oblivion, forgetting all the knowledge to perform miracles or past reincarnations. So this is why the young Jesus born out of Virgin Mary could not perform miracles. But Christ did not go through this process. He entered into the body made by the ETs. So this is why Christ remembered the knowledge to perform miracles.
Okay, I got a question then. I'm going to have to jump in on that one, because the issue that you're bringing up is then how do we explain the apostles being able to do miracles? If Jesus couldn't do it, then how in the world could the apostles do it?
Once Christ was able to really resurrect, and then like a ET from Thiaoouba or ET from Advanced Planet, they can really make someone to perform certain miracles. For example, when Michel was on the planet Thiaoouba, he was given the ability to see auras, the human energy fields, and to understand and communicate in all the different languages, not just languages on Earth, but also languages on different planets. So he was given the ability to have this kind of miraculous talent. And Christ, on the other hand, is one of the ETs, and he was able to really have someone to perform miracles by giving that person the ability to do so. And I think this is what happened in the past.
Just for clarification, what was the purpose of the Jesus born through Mary? What was the purpose of his birth? Why go through all that if he was? Is that because he went to India and did teaching over there, or what was his purpose in life?
Is to catch people's attention when he was born, because when he was born out of a virgin with the images in Joseph's, like what happened in the past, when during the time or before Jesus was born, it was a huge event that caused the King Herod to kill all the babies. So that really caught people's attention. That's the main purpose.
Okay, so that's, I mean, we're basically putting a couple theories out there, and exactly one is from the Bible, one's from Thiaouba's prophecy, and I want to make sure that people understand that this, what you're saying, I want people to understand that's not the normal Orthodox traditional. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but I want people to understand that that's not how most theologians would look at it. What about atonement? Is that the Jesus that was created by the Thiaouboons, or was there no need for atonement? Well, I mean, what's the purpose of the resurrection then?
The purpose of resurrection is just to show people that there is life after death, because he resurrected. So we should pay attention to our spirituality, because we have different reincarnations. We have to really learn different spiritual lessons in each of our lifetime, because there's life after death. And for some reason, if you remember, if you've studied it, you're going to realize that the Gnostics, the early Christians, some of them believed in reincarnations.
Well, I have a question for you, and it's going to come off of this last slide. Well, I guess it's not there. There are two tombs there.
Yes.
Okay, now is one of them the Jesus from India, and the other one is the Jesus who was crucified? Can you fill us in on exactly what those two tombs represent?
So one is the tomb of Jesus, the one who was born out of Virgin Mary.
Okay.
The other is the tomb of the brother of Jesus, who died in China. And Jesus, the one who traveled to India and went through China and died in Japan, had a lock of his brother's hair buried on the other tomb. So if you open the other tomb, you're going to find a lock of his brother's hair. Christ was crucified on the cross and then resurrected. He never died, actually. His physical body probably died, but he never died in reality. So Christ never went to Japan, and he preached about his teachings in the Middle East, and that's what happened.
Okay. Well, the question that I'm wondering, I'm curious, and like I said, I'm not debating, it's a question, is that in the book of Acts, it says that there was about 500 witnesses that Jesus was lifted up into the sky and received into the clouds. How would that fit into all this story?
This is what the ETs did, and actually they resurrected the Christ who died on the cross, and then in 3 days' time, after he died, after 3 days, and then he was resurrected. That was done by the ETs in their spacecraft. They wanted to show people that Christ resurrected, to give people's hope that life goes on after death.
So was there a spacecraft inside that cloud? Because I've always wondered that. I think you're also arguing, or not arguing, you're expressing the idea that what people called God at that time, but you believe there is a God, but which is a consistent theory of many in this community, is that it was aliens who brought us here and had something to do with our creation. And is that a similar line there? It seems to be also with the idea of the nuclear threat and the environmental threats and stuff like that, that there seems to be a consistent refrain on those things. And this narrative that you're putting out, it's a different narrative than some. It's not exactly identical, but there are some similarities in it. So is that, do you see that as well?
Yes. So there's God, the creator, which is a pure spirit. But in the Bible, there are talks about Jehovah's or Jehovah's. In fact, when you read about the Jehovah's, they're actually Thiaoubans, according to this book. And those are the highly advanced ETs who came to us, trying to help us about leading us into the right direction in our lives. So there are two different concepts. One is the creator, which is a pure spirit, which doesn't have a face, which is not physical, and the other is the Jehovah's.
Yeah. Okay. Now here's the big question, and this is the one that even I struggle to answer: is why does the God in the Old Testament, or the God that's portrayed in the Old Testament, why does he look so different than Jesus and the God of the New Testament? Because if you go and read the Old Testament and you see the violence and everything going on, why does it? I mean, trust me, I'm not the only person to ever bring this up. It's been brought up a lot, but the argument that I was taught is that it was different covenants. That was the covenant of law versus the covenant of grace. But to me, God is God. God doesn't change. Whether you're talking about the faceless God you're talking about, or you're talking about the same God I'm talking about, God doesn't change. And that really shaped my theology, because I really narrowed my theology down to this. Because I really believe if God is love and God is good, then Jesus absolutely expressed what it's all about when he was asked the question, what is the great commandment? And he said it was to love God and to love people. And he said he even went so far as to say it fulfilled the prophets and the law. And what a lot of people don't understand is that time, the prophets and the law, that was the Old Testament. That was the Bible as they had it at that time. They didn't have a New Testament. And so what Jesus was saying, if you took all of the law and the prophets and you put it all together and you tried to sum up what it's all about, it's about loving God and loving people. And so that's where I am now. I'm not about rules. I'm going to get into that in a minute as we talk more about spirituality. But I still look at the Old Testament and I have a hard time, and I'm going, it's a wrestle with me, because I wrestle with that, because it's like, why did Jesus come to correct and fix whatever went awry in the Old Testament, that these people got completely off track and got bloodthirsty, and Jesus had to bring them back and teach them how to love people, even their own people who they had exiled because they didn't look a certain way, they didn't act a certain way, they didn't dress a certain way. And I see that in the church today. And I told you this when we were talking earlier. When I look at the church today, I swear it looks more like the Pharisees than it does like Jesus. And I want the church to look more like Jesus than like the Pharisees. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. God is a pure spirit, so we can communicate to God, but God really doesn't give instructions on what to do, because we have the free will. And what happened in the Old Testament was what the Thiaoubans or Jehovah's did to the Hebrews, and suggesting them that they should do certain things. And the people who were not the Hebrews at that time, they worshipped idols. And This is a very sensitive topic, but I'm going to try my best to explain. Sometimes I think, since English is not my first language, my language ability fails me. So let me try my best. But I would suggest people to read the book to get more understanding and the ideas what happened in the past, especially in the Old Testaments. So the Hebrews came to Earth about 12,000 years ago. So the blacks, the yellows, the Caucasians all came from category 1 planet. So the lowest category. So Earth is a category 1 planet. But the Hebrews, on the other hand, came here accidentally. So according to this book, they came from category 3 planet. So this is why when you read the Old Testament, you always read about in the past, the Hebrews lived 800 or 900 years old, because on category 3 planet, they had longer longevity. So they came here accidentally because of a malfunctioning of their spacecraft. And they encountered a lot of difficult people or their neighbors when they landed in what's now today's southern Russia. Because of the temperature, they moved south to get a milder climate during wintertime. And then they encountered the Normas, the people who wanted to rape their women. So they had troubles with their neighbors since they landed on Earth. And then they were highly spiritual people, but they had to resort in killing the people who were trying to rape their women. So they had to defend themselves. And then throughout time, I think this is what happened, was that because they were highly spiritual, they were chosen, and they landed on a planet in which they were not supposed to, and this is why they excel at different in different fields, and so many Jewish people are so intelligent, and the Ethiopians explain that they were chosen because they were highly spiritual, and they were under the evil rules of the Egyptian pharaohs. So the rules of the pharaohs enslaving the Hebrews depraved the Hebrews' ability or opportunity to be more spiritual. So this is why they decided to have Moses to liberate the Hebrews out of the evil rules of the ancient pharaohs. And then, so there's the story of Exodus, and afterwards the Ethiopians guided the Hebrews to really maintain their spirituality and to different from the rest of the people who are non-Hebrews. So this is what I think would happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's interesting, because a lot of the stuff you're saying, it's not necessarily in the Bible. It's probably from the book that you help translate. Interpreting, understanding from that standpoint. But one thing about the people living so old, there seems to be a delineation, and in it, before the flood and after the flood. Now, some people have speculated that the reason why people lived longer prior to the flood is because it never rained prior to the flood, that there was a water envelope, above in the sky, and that kept all of the radiation and stuff going down. So that's another possible theory, but it definitely shows after the flood that the length of life, and how does that fit into the idea that the Hebrews lived longer? Why did all of a sudden, is it because they intermarried? Is that why, under your theory, that they didn't live as long once they intermarried with other or were raped, or whatever you want to say? That's why they didn't live as long.
That's part of the reason. If you really read about the Chinese Qigong masters or the Chinese saints, some of them lived a few hundred years old, and they have specific practices that they used to live longer and to be more spiritual, including meditation and the kind of things that they eat. And I think intermarriage is only part of the reason. And I think there are other reasons too, including, actually, I think the longevity is actually predestined. It's you plan what kind of spiritual lessons or challenges you're going to have in your lifetime to learn the lessons. So I think it's really predetermined as well.
Well, the interesting thing is you just brought up the idea. Some people call it reincarnation. Some people call it past lives. But I was talking to somebody the other day, and while the Bible itself doesn't specifically speak on that, it doesn't speak on ghosts. I've had my ghost experiences. I know for a fact that ghosts exist. I had one at the church that just absolutely is unexplainable. There's no way you can explain it. There were at least four witnesses that saw it. But even when Jesus was on the water, the disciples thought he was what? They thought he was a ghost. And so the concept of ghost go back even into the first century. So even though the Bible's silent on it, it doesn't mean that that teaching wasn't out there. It's just not necessarily written in. You got one book. And I think it's a mistake to think that everything about God and us can be fitted into one book, on it. But the other thing is, the idea of living on into another life. Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" Well, some people say Elijah, some people say John the Baptist. And the importance of that is that Elijah had been dead for at least around 600 years, somewhere in that ballpark, and John the Baptist is kind of the weird one because he was alive at the same time that Jesus was. But people thought that Jesus was them reincarnate, and so I'm arguing that the idea of ghosts, the idea of past lives, even though it's not theologically taught in the Bible, it clearly was, people believed in it because they thought Jesus was a ghost. They thought he might be Elijah. They thought he might be John the Baptist. And so that's why I'm so big about not putting things in a box. I think, Samuel, you and I have a lot of things in common. My big issue, my problem with spirituality is as soon as it's defined and organized by men, it becomes what, and I think it's one of the things you're fighting against. It's one of the things the Thiaoubans in the book are fighting against, and that is organized religion. And I'll give you an example of how it might look to someone, how it looked to me. When I first became a Christian, God was magical. I mean, everything was a mystery. It was exciting, and I couldn't wait. But then I went to Bible college, and the Bible became a textbook. And once it became a textbook, guess what happened to all that magic and all that mystery? They tried to explain it, and they tried to organize it, and they tried to define it. And then they tried to say, well, you know what? The Baptists have this wrong. The Methodists have this wrong. The Pentecostals have this wrong. And I think that this is one of the reasons I'm spiritual and not religious. This is why I've defined my spirituality, love God, love people, is because I think that religion is where spirituality goes to die. Because then you start getting involved with rituals and you do things just to do them. You go to church on Sunday morning, well, just because you're supposed to. You help the church out, which a church obviously needs help. I don't know why people think all churches are about money. We have lights, we have electricity, we got bills to pay just like you do in your home. Now, there are a lot of churches, or not a lot, but there's some out there, where they are about money. And I agree with that. But, the problem is like I said, is I look at the church today, to me, it reminds me of the very thing that Jesus was fighting against. It's where it became religion, where you have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way, you have to dress a certain way to be a member, And I'm just like, I think spirituality is so different than that. It's a guideline. It's some principles you can live to love and to be loved. But once you start defining it, once you start organizing it, and you make everybody have to look the same, then that becomes what's called organized religion. And I just think that kills spirituality. I really do. And like I said, me being a person who's gone through it myself, I had to reevaluate myself and say, okay, who am I and why is God here? And because I know there's a God. I know there's a God because there's too many different things that have happened in my life for there not to be somebody helping me. And I'm going to call that someone God. Now, do I understand who that someone is? Do I understand everything about him? That's why I'm open. I want to listen to these stories about Jesus' tomb in Japan. I want to learn. That's what we should all want. We're all on a journey of discovery. And some of the things we learn are going to be true. Some of them are not. Some of the things we believed before that we thought were true, that maybe we're going to learn they're not. But we're all on a journey of truth. Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree. Totally agree. And I think in the ideal world, the religious organizations should lead people to communicate directly to the creator and not to stand in their way. So I think it's better to be like a guide or mentor than an organized religion trying to pretend to be the agent for the creator.
To be the expert on it. So you got to, in the old days where you had to go to the priest, and there was a point in time with the church where only the clergy had the Bible, and some of it may be expenses because before Gutenberg came out with the printing press, now we have the internet, everybody can do it. But I think even the church that had that issue, but the reason why is they were so afraid that people would read the Bible for themselves and get it wrong. So we got to make sure we tell you what's right. And then all of a sudden, like I said, especially in the Protestant movement, then you end up with all these different denominations where everybody's got their own view on everything.
Yeah.
And
I actually have a question for you. If I or you have the opportunity to meet the Pope, the new Pope, Pope Leo, what would you say to him?
What would I say to him?
Yeah.
Well, I'd ask him a million questions, because I think there is some stuff in the vaults at the Vatican. my question would be, hey, can I go in and check the vaults out? Because there's a lot of speculation that there's a lot of information about UAPs within the Vatican. I guess I probably should have went for more of a spiritual truth, but I am locked in on the UFO issue and the UAP issue, and they say there's stuff there. To me, at the end of the day, I just want people to know what's real. I want them to know what reality is. And I just don't feel like we're being told what reality is. And some people argue it's religion holding us back. And I could agree in part with that. But I think there's a whole lot of other things that they are worried that society will break down, not just religion. And I'll argue this, that, the Bible teaches that the sun rotated around the earth, that the sun stood still, and we now know, and Galileo was the one who figured it out, we are orbiting around the sun. The sun is the center of our solar system, not Earth. And that was a big deal. They had threatened to kill Galileo over it. They put him under house arrest. But the church eventually recognized it, acknowledged it, and it didn't destroy the church. And so that's one of my arguments, that hopefully it will destroy religion, but I don't think it will ever destroy spirituality and people believing in Jesus or whatever their spirituality is. I don't think it will have that. I think somebody once asked me, what do you think will happen? Well, I think, on the Christian side of it, I think some people will leave the church, and I think some people will come into the church, and that's just the way it happens when there's a major event. A lot of times it draws people to God, but something like this, where people might feel, in fact, Andy Marciel's was on a space with me, and he used to believe in God, in Jesus.
Yeah.
But when he had an encounter with a UFO, that basically destroyed his faith. And so that's why I say, for some people, it will probably destroy their faith. For others, they'll be able to look beyond that and realize that it just means there's so much more than they ever imagined, out there.
I'm the other people. And because I did not believe in the Bible, I did not believe in Jesus. But after reading the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, I studied the Bible more carefully, and especially the 4 Gospels in the New Testament. And actually, there's one information I like to bring up, is that there's an astrologer in the U.S. called Gianpaolo, and he received a phone call one day that sounded like robotic. It was given to him like a date, like a date of birth, which is March 28th, AD 28 at 5:40 a.m. in Israel. So he was actually draw this birth chart, astrological birth chart, and then he did. That appeared to be like a Christ-like or saint-like birth chart, and then he just wondered, like, where did that caller find this date and the time for the birth chart? And the caller said it's the Vatican records, and then hung up and never communicated to him again. So this is my theory or hypothesis, is that Jesus, like many people try to draw the birth birth chart of Jesus, and didn't really come out well to be something somewhat spiritual. But Christ, on the other hand, because the ETs have this knowledge to utilize kind of like knowledge of astrology or electromagnetic forces of the electrons to make someone appear, to be born or to appear at the optimal time. So they had Christ, the Christ who was crucified and resurrected, to appear at that time on that date, and then so that's actually a perfect spiritual being, in which I think I can repeat the date is March 28th, AD 28 at 5:40 a.m. in Israel. So that's the Bethlehem. So that's the date and time and location in which the birth chart appear to be like both spiritual and practical person. And I think when I have the Pope, when I have the opportunity to meet the Pope, hopefully in the future, I'm going to ask him about this.
We each have our questions. Maybe if you'll get somebody to get him to watch our podcast, that each one of us can get our question or request. You can request that. I'm going into the vaults. That's where I'm going. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to pass go. I'm going to get there. Let's go ahead and we're running close to time, but we're not there yet. Let's just hit on the Great Pyramids in Egypt. What was the purpose of that? Atlantis and Easter Island. Now, you talked about the Hebrews coming over about 12,000 years ago. The people from Atlantis, you're talking hundreds of thousands of years ago, right? And so how did they get here?
So the people Atlantis came here before the Hebrews came here. They came from an unnamed planet. The Caucasians actually were not talked about very much in the book for very strange reasons. I don't know why, but the ancestors of the Polynesians were from a different planet called Arimo X3. It's the same planet in which Michel visited before he landed on the planet Thiaoouba. It's a planet that had the nuclear war before, 150 years ago. And the people from that planet came to Earth about 250,000 years ago because they had the overpopulation issue. So they migrate their people to Earth just for their original planet to be less crowded. But they encountered resistance from the Chinese people living on the northwestern corner of that continent. And that continent existed in the past, but no longer existed in the Pacific Ocean, less the Hawaiian Islands and the Easter Island and some of the Pacific Islands. I know that because the Chinese people are very suspicious. They were very suspicious too. So they really attacked the people from Arimo X3, the ancestors of the Polynesians. Being highly spiritual, the people from Arimo X3 did not want to fight against the Chinese people. So they retreated back to the far side of the moon. So they established artificial ET bases on the backside of the moon. So this is why some people say that there are something strange happening on the far side of the moon. Yes, they are ET bases built by the ETs just to migrate their people to Earth. And then they established a very successful civilization on the Moria, building a Great Pyramid and also the sculptures or statues on Easter Island. And unfortunately, there was an earthquake, a natural disaster, that caused the entire continent sunk into the ocean almost overnight. Michel saw this because he was taken by the ETs to see the past. So he saw like a holographic film that portrayed what happened in the past. And then, but before the disaster occurred, some other people colonized Atlantis. So they passed some of their knowledge to the people on Atlantis. So there was a very wise person called Thao, in which the Egyptians think to be a god figure. And he was the main person who built the Great Pyramid of Egypt about 17,000 years ago. And he used anti-gravitational technologies and supersonic vibratory systems to cut the huge stones in a very precise manner. And the pyramid was used as an energy center. So the ancient pharaohs sat in the king's chamber and meditated and communicated to the people on different planets. So it's not a tomb for the pharaohs, but as an energy center to capture cosmic and terrestrial energies.
So you're talking about Kufa or Cheops. That's the one you're talking about, the biggest one. Yeah, yes. I went there. I was very disappointed because when I went to Israel, we were supposed to go in that one, and we ended up going to one of the smaller ones. Now, one thing that really surprised me is once you get inside of them, how claustrophobic it is. I mean, it is not open wide. You got this narrow little path you go through, and we went all the way to the other side of it. Real quick, and then we're going to move on in the last 20 minutes and talk about UAPs in China. But what about like Mars? Is there anything about life that we had lived on Mars or a civilization on Mars before us? Is there anything in the book about that, or are they silent on Mars?
Yes, actually, before when the blacks and the yellows came to Earth, they actually explored Mars about 1.35 million years ago. So back in the past, there were people who lived on Mars. And I just listened to a recent interview by Joe Rogan with Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer. And he actually believed that there were civilizations or people who used to live on Mars. And indeed, actually, Michel was told that people who lived on Mars were highly spiritual. But because Mars was a planet in which its core cooled down, so it became a dead planet. When the core of a planet cooled down, it no longer can capture the atmosphere because it no longer has the electromagnetic field to capture the atmosphere. So Mars became like a desert. But there were people who lived on Mars. Some of them actually went to Earth, and they were the Tibetans, the Tibetan people.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've done some podcasts on remote viewing, and I can't remember if it's Ingle Swan or if it's Joe McMoneagle, but one of them was asked to remote view, I believe, Mars 1 million years ago, and he went back and there was like this huge pyramid there. In fact, they swear that on the edge of a crater, it's there. And I think it's Mars anyway. Could be the moon. I could be wrong, but I think it's Mars.
It's Mars.
And that there were like life-sustaining stations inside, and these people that he was remote viewing, these beings, were there trying to stay alive long enough for them to be rescued. And so, but it's interesting because it was like 1 million years ago, and then you're talking about life being there, and there was a long time we didn't. Scientists argued that there was no life on Mars because there's no water on Mars. Well, guess what? They've now discovered water on Mars, and even lately they discovered some form of life from the rocks that came from Mars. And so it's all coming together. Let's move on and let's talk about what's going on in China. You were born in Beijing, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I was born in Beijing, China.
So you have a very interesting perspective. When did you leave China? So give me an idea if I'm in the right ballpark to ask you these questions.
1993.
Okay, so you're just between the 1980s and 1990s, there was a boom in UAP communities, in clubs, and the government was involved with it as well, affiliations and stuff. Does any of that survive? Because I've heard some stories, but you know how it is. I'd rather talk to somebody who's been there, lived there, who's got the information. I'm sure you still got family members that are there. Are they still active today?
No, not really. Unfortunately, the Chinese government has more strict control over the media in the last 10 years or so. So the UFO or UAP community in China has died down a little bit.
Well, one of the things that was said, which is I find that very interesting that you say that, because one of the things that was said is that the Chinese government, it looks like it was inaccurate, that the government encouraged these clubs and groups, but the deal was they had to report their findings to the government, and so the Chinese government is getting all of this data through these clubs. So what you're telling me is that's pretty much dried up?
It's pretty much dried up nowadays because people are afraid to really be considered to be like superstitious or something like nowadays there's a different kind of media atmosphere. People are afraid of there's a very strict reporting system in China, and people report that you're violating the rules, community rules, and it became very serious. Your account could be really deleted and removed, and the police can also go to your home and to arrest you. So it has become very dangerous for a lot of people.
That's scary, because if you've got somebody who doesn't like you, can't they just make stuff up about you?
Yeah, they can do that, and sometimes it's so. Actually, a few of my videos got removed from some of the accounts in China.
Wow, that's I mean, that's kind of shocking, because it seems like because this is my next question, and I'm sure I'm confident what the answer is going to be. Does China have a UAP recovery and reverse engineering program that you know of?
If there is, then I wouldn't know about that because they don't consider me Chinese anymore.
Okay, but even when you were living there, there weren't any rumors of secret programs like we have in Area 51. Was there anything like that?
When I was living there, I know that there was a very famous ufologist called Dr. Sun Shili, and he speaks Spanish and Chinese. He used to be the interpreter for Chairman Mao, and he said that the military general approached him and asked him about the UFOs, the UAPs in the sky, because they were trying to find out what they were, and trying to launch military actions against those UAPs. But they never got into the zone of attack, so they never had real military actions against them. So they asked Dr. Sun what they were, and Dr. Sun said he told them that they were just something that they were doing research on. And then he learned that the Chinese military, did not consider them to be a threat because by observing them, their actions, they saw that they did not pose any danger. And there were also not espionage activities from foreign countries. So this is the conclusion they reached in the early 1990s.
Wow, that sounds similar to ours, but I mean, it makes sense. Doesn't it make sense to you that they have to be doing that? Because this is, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not the first person to say this, this is the new arms race. And the truth of the matter is, whether it be Russia, China, or the US, whoever breaks this technology first wins. Because with some of the stuff they have, I don't know, maybe the Thiaoubans would come in and help us or something like that. But if we're talking about, the way things are right now, whoever unlocks this technology first is going to be the dominating power for maybe thousands of years, because this stuff is so, some of it's so far advanced. I mean, we can't catch them. We can't see them most of the time. And even the drone stuff going over New Jersey and the stuff at Langley and, Wright-Patterson. I mean, this is stuff that they literally were helpless to do anything about, over in Britain and stuff like that. And so imagine the other tech that's out there, and if whoever unlocks it. So that's why I would be very, very surprised if China does not have a reverse engineering program. I think it would be an absolute shock.
I think from what I know is that the technology, even if we do have reverse engineer abilities, and if we did that, then if we don't improve our spiritual awareness or spirituality, we're going to destroy ourselves. For one thing, if you're learning from the vehicles that crashed on Earth, you are not learning from the best. You're learning from inferior. I was using the word inferior ETs. So I wouldn't really focus on those. I would focus on more the spiritual aspects that the ETs, more advanced ETs, have been telling us.
I wish we had the spirituality you're talking about. My question for you now is, go ahead and give us a couple of examples of maybe the two best known UAP events, UFO events in China that you've heard of.
So the most well-known one is the one in Phoenix Mountain in the 1990s, in which a person named Mr. Meng, he was a local farmer or like a regular person in the northeastern part of China, and he encountered a spacecraft in the mountains areas. And then he was approached by the ETs afterwards, and they actually showed him the natural resources on Earth, like the natural gas and petroleum, saying that if you don't take care of your natural resources or develop your clean energy, then one day or sooner or later, you're going to deplete your natural resources. They actually showed him a holographic picture or map of where the natural resources are located. And then he asked them, like, why they come here? Why did they come here to visit us? And they said that they were trying to escape a collision in which one of the moons, one of the asteroids of the Jupiter was going to hit Jupiter. So they actually lived on one of the moons of Jupiter. So in order to prevent that disaster from happening or affecting them, they came to Earth to escape that. That date, the date that he encountered the ETs, was actually the date that the asteroid hit Jupiter. And I can give you the exact date later, but this is one of the most famous incidents in China, warning the people on Earth about our environment. And the other incident was in 1999, in December 1999, a principal of a school in Beijing, who is also a semi-government official, he actually woke up in the middle of the night, and then he was taken by two ETs wearing like a spacesuit, one male, one female, into their spacecraft. And then he was taught to heal a person who was ill. They had a girl taken by them, a girl on Earth, like an earthly girl, into their spacecraft. And then the ETs showed this school principal how to heal that girl. And then what they did was that they asked the principal to put his hand on the back neck, which is a Dazhui acupressure point, this location, and then the girl was healed by the principal. So in order to verify if this story is true or not, or just his hallucination or imagination, they traced the girl down and found the girl, located the girl, who was actually a disabled person. And then after that date, she became like a normal person. Both incidents in which the guy, Mr. Meng, and then this school principal, they went through polygraph exam and also psychological examinations, so that according to the ufologists in China, their stories are authentic, and they were actually well publicized by the state media, by the official media in China.
So it would be similar, I guess, to some of the miracles in the Bible,
yeah,
where cripples were healed, they were touched in a certain way, maybe, or something like that. That would be a comparison. Were there any mass sightings? I mean, where you talk hundreds or 1,000 people saw, the Phoenix Lights here in 1997 was definitely one in the USA. Is there a mass event like that in China that you're aware of?
Yes, there are a lot of sightings in which people observed and took photos or videos of. But my personal focus is not just about the sightings; it's more about the profound implications of disclosure. And I think we should learn from the ETs, who are far more advanced than the ETs who just crashed on Earth. And I think the sightings are interesting, but not really.
Yeah, you're more about the message of the spirituality and save our planets, become better people, avoid Armageddon, and stuff like that, which is, that's good. It fits with kind of what I believe, because, I think that we can become better. Other people use the word vibration level, raising our vibration level, or whatever you want to call it. But you can look at all these different things but we're all really saying the same thing, and that is that we need to do better. We need to be better. We need to be more loving. We need to, if you want to call it spirituality, and figure out where our place is in this universe, and how are we going to get along with our cousins, out there in space, but to raise that level so that when, that maybe we can get the technology, maybe we'll be allowed. I know you said the part of it is just the struggle of life, that we've got to learn that. But I'm telling you something, I would love to see cancer gone. I'd love to see cancer completely eradicated. There's been too many people that I've dealt with, that I've buried myself, that have had cancer, and it's heartbreaking. And so I hope we can do it, first of all. And second of all, if we do it, I hope that they will help us to be able to allow us to have that technology so that we can eradicate things like that. And,
let me give you a
Lou
tip.
Gehrig's disease. I mean, think about that. If you've ever seen anybody die from Lou Gehrig's disease, it's just an awful thing,
I can give you a tip. If you read the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, it talks about the human energy field, or auras. And I did some research on aura readers, people who can see the colors of auras. One of which is Judith Collins in Australia. And she tells me that the colors of auras of the cancer's tumors are very similar to the places in which they have viral infections. So there's a strong link between viruses and cancer. And if you read the book, Medical Medium, Thyroid Healing by Anthony William, you're going to learn about the root cause of cancer according to him, which is the combination of virus and chemical toxins. So the two have very kind of complicated interactions, in which causing a tumor or tissue to become malignant tumors. So if you're able to cleanse your body and to have antiviral methods, and I think at early stages of cancer can be healed or cured, but not late stages. In late stages, you have to really, and I think have surgeries, or maybe just do a lot of cleansings.
I think what you're saying, we'll close out with this, is that we are killing ourselves in more ways than one. And if we actually would start taking better care of our planet, start taking better care of ourselves, and watching what we're eating and not polluting our planet, and if we don't destroy ourselves with nuclear war, there's a beautiful life, a beautiful path ahead for us. And the Thiaoubans have basically laid that out for us. And if we just learn to live the right way, love the right way, and develop ourselves spiritually, that's the life we could have as well. Did I sum that up pretty good?
Yes, very good. And look inside for answers, for the kingdom of God is within you.
Within you. Okay, that makes sense. Well, Samuel, I want to thank you for coming on. I'll tell you what, this has been a very enlightening subject. There's a lot for people to take from this. Like I said, just listen to what was said, go do the research yourself. Find your truth based on what you learn. Don't just take somebody else's word for it. You own it. You investigate. You own it. You determine based on the evidence what you believe. I think that's the way to go, because we're all, like I said, at the end of the day, I think what we all want is truth, and truth is often a journey. But anyway, Samuel, thank you so much for being here. Great podcast. I'm going to go ahead and take you off and do the closing now. Well, I want to thank everyone that has watched. If you made it all the way to the end, congratulations. I really appreciate that. If you made it here, you might as well go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done that. And as I mentioned earlier, go ahead and hit that bell. We've got a lot of exciting guests coming up. Like I said, we've got Dr. Lynn Kitai. She'll be coming on. We've got several others. We've got Christopher Sharp. I mentioned some of those in the beginning, so I'm not going to repeat them all. But this is a channel that's been around for about 2 years. We're at like 971 subscribers, and I'd love to get over 1,000. I appreciate it. Goodbye, and God bless.
try to push on my deal. Take your time to complete. I ain't wanna rock star. I ain't care.